What's good, everybody? This your boy Carlton Irvin. Welcome back to the Philly Fantasy Joint podcast, where we talk fantasy football through the off season and year round. So look, this is what I'm thinking about today, and this is just a random rant. I ain't writing no notes down or anything like that, but these are the 4 questions I ponder when I think about the top running backs of last year, or just the top running backs name-wise in fantasy football. Okay, so my first question or thought to myself is, does Saquon Barkley repeat as the number 1 running back in fantasy football? Now, I'm an Eagles fan. As you get accustomed to this channel, you will know that I am definitely an Eagles fan. I'm from Philadelphia and everything. But the thing about, look, Saquon Barkley balled out last year. I've had him in a few of my leagues. Some leagues I wish I had more of them in. But I had him in a few of my leagues, and he balled out from the start to finish. You know, he's behind that high-powered offensive line. Eagles are a running team, which is very different from years past, but they are a running team. But we do have to think about how teams are going to game plan to stop Saquon Barkley. And how are they going to game plan to stop, Saquon Barkley from going off on him? So, like, as we near closer to mock drafts and as we near closer to the season, my prediction on Saquon Barkley is that he still is a top 5 to top 10 running back. Do I believe he can get top running back? Again, yeah, but I would say top 5, top 10 running back. I don't think that it's like, it's not crazy to think that that production from last year would dip off. So I know it's going to be a lot of people that draft him as the top running back off the board. Some may even draft him number 1. But it is also important to know, like, fantasy football changes year in and year out, and there's always surprises. So you never know what's going to happen. I think people should just keep that in mind when they look to take Saquon Barkley in the first round. More than likely, that's where he would go. So just keep that in mind. Like, I'm not saying don't draft him or anything, because look, I'm going to draft him in some of my teams, but if you have a high pick, you got to keep that in mind. You got to keep that in mind that is always a rotating thing with fantasy football, where a top wide receiver, like for instance Jamyrr Chase, number 1 wide receiver last year, still has a pretty good chance to do that again. But it took Jamyrr Chase 4 fantasy seasons to get number 1. So it's a hard thing to do in fantasy football. So with that being said, you can expect Saquon. I expect Saquon to be at least a top 5 to top 10, no less than top 10 running back again, for fantasy football. But I don't expect him, like, it's not saying I don't think he can reach that production, but he's another year older. Teams are going to game plan to stop Saquon a little better. So even though he might get his, he might have games where it might not be happening. So we'll see. We'll see. Number 2, can Derrick Henry give you another solid year? Derrick Henry was a top 5 running back last year. Can he give you another solid year? He's 31 years old. I'm not sure when his birthday, but I'm not sure when his birthday is, but I'm gonna guess that he's probably gonna be 32 going into the season or even during the season. Baltimore Ravens like to run the offense around Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, and Derrick Henry's a freak of nature, man. He's probably the only running backs that I believe at the age of 31, unless you want to count Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson was still kicking it around that age, but Derrick Henry is more productive. So do we still think that Derrick Henry is going to be another top 5 running back? I believe is a chance. You do have to consider age, even though he's a freak of nature and he is still the king. You have to consider age with this. I think the best case scenario for him is probably top 5 running back. But I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if he falls from that perch. He's getting up there in age, getting them treads on the tires. So I would not be surprised if at least he goes like, top 15 top running back, a running back that's going to get his production and everything like that, but he might have some off games. We'll see, though. But that's when it comes to Derrick Henry, I do believe that top 5 is his ceiling and his floor, possibly due to maybe, aging as a running back and tread on the tires and defense is trying to adjust to stop him more. I believe that you might be able to see something like top 10, top 15. We might see a decline in Derrick Henry. I'm not banking on it because I will still draft him in certain leagues, but you have to take into consideration the fact that, what are your expectations for Derrick Henry? What are your expectations? So that's my second question with the running backs. My third question is, will CMC return back to form? Last season, people rushed to draft CMC number 1. I think even in one league, it was a free league. I didn't really care. I was just kind of messing around. But in the free league, I did draft him number 1. That free league, I can't remember the record I did good. I think I did good in that league. I made the playoffs. I didn't win it, but I had other drafting hits that helped me out. But that was a wasted pick last year. Nobody knew the injury was as severe as it was when it first happened. It was, okay, he's out week 1. Okay, cool. CMC is out week 1. He'll be back week 2. Week 2. All right. Week 2 comes. He's still not here, but it's CMC. So he's gonna be there come week 3. And then after week 4, everybody just kind of gave up. You know what? Whatever. When's this guy gonna play? He finally comes into play. I think he has maybe one solid game. I literally won a game that CMC was balling out in. I think it was the Buffalo game. He was doing good and he was doing all right in it. And then he got injured. I won a game because of that. And so it's with that Achilles tendonitis, CMC's getting older. I believe he's 30 years old now. He's been used the most out of any running back in the last 5 years. Between the Panthers, between the San Francisco Niners, they have ran him into the ground. Here's what I will say about CMC, because I know because of his injury history, people are now kind of shying away from it. CMC still has tremendous upside. He still has tremendous upside to go out there to be a top 5 running back, even maybe a top 5 player in all of fantasy football. But you have to understand that he is getting older. He has been used. We could be last season could have been the season where you look at it and be like, you know what? CMC's probably over. I'm not saying don't draft him, but is a chance that maybe 2 years ago is the best we've seen from CMC, and that's not going to happen again. Every running back body is affected differently, especially a running back like CMC who has been used on a constant basis. Carolina used CMC. CMC was Carolina when he was there. And then he goes to San Francisco, and they've used him too. They tried to scale back his characters. I said his characters. They tried to scale back his carries, and you just can't. He's that good of a football player when he is fully healthy. But does he have another type of vintage CMC year? I want to believe so, but I honestly believe no. But here's what I will say. His ADP is probably going to go around early second, late second, early third. I can take a chance with that, knowing that he has that potential. When you talk about CMC, you don't need him for a full 17 games. You don't. You do not need him for a full 17. If he gives you a solid, let's say 11 to 13 games, and he's healthy in those games, more than likely he's going to pay off some dividends for you. Even if it's not top 5, top running back in the whole league, he might be top 10, top 12. That's what CMC does. And he can also win you a week. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at CMC on your draft boards and he's falling maybe second or third round. He would be potentially a steal, a player that can literally win you a week, or even maybe the top RB in fantasy football, or can come close to it. But you also got to look at the other scenario where he's just not it no more. So it's a risk that you're going to have to think about taking as a drafter and as a GM of fantasy football. The number 4 and final question. Can Jamyrr Gibbs be a number 1 running back in fantasy football? And look, here's what I would say. I believe he can. I believe that he can be a number 1 running back in fantasy football. I'm not sure if it's going to happen this year, but he's close. He's close. If I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he was like the top 5, top 6. Jamyrr Gibbs is young, doesn't really have no real injury history. He's explosive. He can catch passes out of the backfield. He can run real well. And he's not even scratched the surface of what he can be. We're probably barring any crazy injuries, we're probably maybe 2 to 3 years away from that real ceiling, like, that CMC type ceiling. I believe that he has a CMC type ceiling, like CMC in his prime. Like, he can do everything. And that team is going to be his. You have David Montgomery, who's a great complementary piece to him. Definitely draftable. David Montgomery is about 28, 29 years old, I believe. So David Montgomery has probably I'll say 1 or 2 solid years left. But this year, you see it's pretty much still even in the backfield between how their touches are. But I do believe that Jamyrr Gibbs gets way more carries this year than David Montgomery. And you'll probably see more of a 65-35 type split or something between them. But I'm banking on Jamyrr Gibbs. I'm high on him. I'm not going to lie, I'm high on him. I'm probably going to have him in a good amount of teams based on where he goes in the draft. If he falls to me, if I got a perfect pick to draft him, I'm going to have him in a good amount of teams. But that's one of the questions that I want to know. I want to know the answers to that question. Can he be number 1 RB in fantasy football? And I believe so. I think that his floor is number 1. His ceiling is number 1 RB in fantasy football. And his floor may be top 10. I believe that barring injury, barring any crazy drop of production and just the offense around him, I believe that he's going to ball out. He's going to ball out. So there you have it. Those are my top 4 questions. Can Saquon repeat as, RB1, number 1 RB in fantasy football? I think, like I said, I think is a chance. But at the same time, you got to think about possible dips in production. But I do think if he has a dip in production, it's not going to be enough to where it's like he's going to kill your team. But just keep in mind that, defenses are going to be gearing up to stop that run game. And it might be more games where Saquon might not get off. And I'm not saying more, a lot more, but let's say 2-3 more games where he might not get off like he did last season. And also, can Derrick Henry be a top 10 running back again? Top 5 at the most. I believe so, but you also, like I said in the video, you also have to account the fact that he's older. Not saying don't draft him. He is older. He has tread on the tires. We don't know how. I think he's 31. He's probably going to be 32 entering the season or during the season. We don't know how, even though he's the king, he's a beast, he's a freak of nature, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if that production is going to dip. I do believe that Derrick Henry is probably going to still be a top 10 RB, but you still have to question these. Can CMC be one of the top backs in fantasy football? We got to see. It's based on his injury history. It's based on, is he over that injury? We have to see. Like I said, CMC, I do believe that he has that potential to be a top 10 RB in fantasy football, top 5, even maybe top 1, depending on if he has one more vintage CMC year. He's still a special talent, and he's going to be probably going around the 2nd or the 3rd round, and that's a discount. And what you need when you play fantasy football, you need high upside players, and if you can get a high upside player at a discount, it's pretty simple. You kind of draft them. Now, you don't have to draft him in the 2nd, 3rd round, but people are going to be looking to draft him at that still and see what he can do. Like, if you draft CMC in the first round and he missed 12 games and he only played 4, that's your fault. If you draft him in the second, third round, even though it's still kind of a wasted pick, it's a little better. Like, second, third round, he missed some games, he not there. At least you ain't below a first round pick on him. And then also, it's like, if you're a great drafter, and you're great at fantasy football, you will make up with it some way, whether it's a trade, whether it's how you draft it. Maybe that was your only pick that you messed up on, and looking at the waiver wire. Number 4, going back to it, can Jamyrr Gibbs be the top running back in fantasy football? I believe so. I am going to have him on some shares of my team. He's young. He's explosive. He's not even reached his prime yet. Well, I would say probably, it depends. Running backs is different. He could be in his prime now. We don't know. But I believe that he hasn't reached his full ceiling of what he can be. But I do believe that he has that potential to be like how CMC was. Top RB fantasy football for years. But it depends on the other circumstances that maybe he can't control, like the drop of production in offense. Detroit did lose Ben Johnson. We got to see how that's going to affect their offense. I believe they're going to keep it the same. It's going to be some of the same schemes like last season. We're going to see. But I do believe that Jamyrr Gibbs can be top fantasy RB. I'm not ready to make a bold proclamation yet, but it might come soon as I do more research, as I get more into these videos. But thank you for joining. Like and subscribe to content. As always, I do have a Facebook group. It's Broad Street Bullies Fantasy Football. I commission pay leagues, some free, but I commission mostly pay leagues. If you want to join, that is cool. There's always going to be spots open, when people drop and leave leagues, whatever. So if you join Broad Street Bullies Fantasy Football, just hit me up. Say you see my video on YouTube, you interested in being a league. All right, I'm out. See you next time. Peace.